The owner shoved the tray so hard it flipped midair, soup splashing across the floor right in front of the old woman he had just thrown out of the restaurant. "I said get out," he barked, voice cutting through the crowded dining room like a blade. Forks stopped midair. A phone camera clicked. The old woman didn't scream, didn't argue. She simply bent down slowly, picked up a napkin that had fallen near her feet, and held it like it mattered more than the humiliation burning around her. Then the young black waitress stepped forward, her apron still damp from spilled drinks, her hands trembling but steady as she reached for the untouched plate on the service counter. "Ma'am," she whispered, trying to place it gently in front of the woman. "You don't have to leave hungry." The manager grabbed her wrist hard. "Did you not hear me? She's banned. And you are next if you keep this up." The old woman looked up at the waitress for a brief second, her eyes calm, unreadable, almost like she was studying something invisible in the girl's face. 3 hours earlier, the restaurant had been normal. Too normal, the kind of busy lunchtime chaos where metal trays clattered, orders overlapped, and nobody looked at anyone twice unless they were paying extra. The waitress, her name tag read Alicia, had already been on her feet since morning shift started, her sneakers slightly worn at the heel from double shifts and unpaid overtime. She balanced a tray of burgers in one hand and a receipt pad in the other, dodging a server who bumped her shoulder without apology. The owner, Mr. Calhoun, stood near the register in a crisp white shirt that never seemed to wrinkle no matter how much he shouted. He didn't run the restaurant like a place people ate. He ran it like a machine that punished anything that slowed profit. That was when the old woman walked in. She moved slowly, holding a small brown handbag pressed tightly against her side, her coat too thin for the restaurant's air conditioning. A few customers glanced at her and quickly looked away. One of the junior servers whispered, "She's gonna ask for water and sit for hours." Another snorted. Mr. Calhoun didn't even look up at first. "We're full," he said flatly, waving a hand without checking. The old woman stepped forward anyway. "I just need something small," she said softly, her voice almost swallowed by the noise of clinking glasses. That's when he finally looked at her, really looked at her. His expression shifted into something colder than annoyance. "This isn't a shelter. If you can't afford it, leave." The silence that followed wasn't accidental, it was trained. Even the music from the speakers seemed to lower itself. Alicia froze behind the service counter, her hand tightening around a napkin she hadn't realized she was holding. The old woman nodded once, slowly, like she had heard worse things before and survived them. She turned toward the exit without protest. That was the moment Alicia moved before thinking, stepping out from behind the counter, ignoring the sharp warning look from the manager, and saying the words that would change the temperature of the entire room. "I'll serve her." And somewhere near the back wall, unseen by anyone, the old woman's fingers tightened slightly around the strap of her handbag. Not in fear, but in quiet recognition, as if something had just begun that nobody in that restaurant was ready to understand. For a second after Alicia spoke, the entire restaurant felt like it had lost its rhythm. Not silent, worse than silent, stiff, like every sound had been held hostage in midair. Mr. Calhoun turned slowly toward her, his expression tightening in a way that made even the closest customers instinctively lean back in their seats. "You'll serve her." He repeated each word measured, like he was testing whether she understood what she had just signed up for. Alicia didn't look away. Her fingers were still resting on the tray she had placed down, knuckles pale from holding it too long. "Yes," she said quietly. "She's hungry." A low laugh broke from somewhere near the register. One of the senior servers shook her head like Alicia had just made a childish mistake. "Girl, don't be stupid," she muttered. But Alicia had already picked up a clean plate. Her movements were careful, almost respectful, as she separated a portion from an order that had been meant for another table. The manager stepped forward fast, grabbing the edge of the counter. "That food is not for her," he said sharply. "You touch that plate, you pay for it." Alicia finally glanced at him. Her voice stayed soft, but it carried something steady underneath. "Then I'll pay." That sentence hit the air differently. Not dramatic, not loud, just final. The manager blinked once, caught off guard by how little hesitation there was in her tone. Mr. Calhoun didn't move at first. He watched her like people watch a broken rule being written in real time. "You realize," he said slowly, "you are choosing a customer who cannot pay over a business that pays your rent." Alicia adjusted her grip on the plate. "I realize she's a person," she replied. That was when the shift began, not loud, but irreversible. Mr. Calhoun exhaled through his nose, then pointed toward the back exit without raising his voice. "Take your break." Indefinitely. The words landed harder than yelling. A few staff members exchanged glances, understanding immediately what that meant. Not a break. A warning. A soft dismissal before the official one. Alicia didn't argue. She simply walked toward the food warmer, took a fresh portion of soup, and poured it carefully into a clean bowl. Her hands stayed steady, even though her stomach tightened with the awareness that she had just stepped outside the invisible line everyone else obeyed. As she walked past the dining tables, she could feel eyes following her. Some curious, some irritated, some entertained like it was a show they hadn't expected to see during lunch. The old woman was still near the entrance now, standing instead of sitting, as if she had decided not to take up space any more than she was allowed. Alicia stopped in front of her and lowered the bowl onto a small side table that wasn't meant for guests. "It's hot," she said gently. The old woman looked at the food for a moment before looking back at Alicia. "You didn't have to do this," she said. Alicia gave a small shrug, wiping her hands on her apron. "You shouldn't have been treated like that." For a second, something flickered across the woman's face. Too quick to name. Then the restaurant. Doors opened again, letting in a sharp gust of outside air, and Alicia heard Mr. Calhoun's voice behind her, colder now than before. "Clock out," he said, "and don't come back until you understand how business works." Alicia didn't turn around immediately. She stayed there a moment longer, watching the old woman take the first bite. Only when she finally stepped toward the back did she notice something she had missed earlier. On the old woman's wrist, half hidden beneath her sleeve, was a thin metallic bracelet with a subtle engraved insignia that did not belong in a place like this. And for the first time, Alicia wondered not just what she had lost, but who she had just chosen to stand in front of. The kitchen door clicked shut behind Alicia, but the sound of it didn't feel like an ending. It felt like something locking her inside a story she hadn't agreed to read. The manager's footsteps faded down the hallway, sharp and fast, like he couldn't stand to be near the decision he had just made. She stood there for a moment in the narrow staff corridor, the hum of refrigerators vibrating through the walls, her apron still warm from the steam of the soup she had just served. Outside that door, the restaurant continued as if nothing had happened. Forks clinked. Conversations resumed. Life returned to its normal cruelty. But inside the corridor, something felt different now, like the air had thickened around her choice. She looked down at her hands. One was slightly trembling, not from fear exactly, but from the weight of realizing there was no easy way back into the version of her life she had been surviving in. Then she noticed it. The bracelet. It wasn't hers. She had seen it before only in passing, on a billboard once outside a corporate building downtown, attached to a man shaking hands under bright cameras. A subtle engraved symbol, geometric and precise, almost like a signature meant for systems rather than jewelry. Alicia frowned slightly, turning her wrist under the fluorescent light. "Where did you get that?" a voice asked suddenly from the doorway. She startled, almost dropping her tray. The old woman stood there now, no longer eating, no longer fragile in the way everyone had assumed she was. She leaned lightly against the frame, her posture steady, observing Alicia with an intensity that didn't match her earlier silence. "It was on your wrist earlier," Alicia said carefully, trying to steady her voice. "You didn't notice?" the woman replied. It wasn't a question meant to be answered. Alicia hesitated. "I thought it was just nothing." A faint expression passed over the woman's face, something between approval and sadness. "That's what people usually think," she said. A loud crash echoed from the dining area. Someone had dropped a tray. The sound made Alicia instinctively glance back, but when she turned again, the hallway felt narrower, like the world had shifted slightly off balance. You shouldn't have helped me, the old woman said softly. Alicia frowned. I don't understand. You were hungry. That wasn't the point, she replied. From somewhere deeper inside the building, a phone rang, sharp, urgent, unanswered. The old woman stepped forward just enough for the light to catch her eyes fully for the first time. They were calm but not ordinary. They carried the stillness of someone used to rooms going silent when she entered them. There are places, she continued, where kindness is not rewarded immediately. It is observed. Alicia felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold corridor. Observed by who? She asked. The woman didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached into her coat and pulled out a folded card, sliding it onto a nearby metal shelf. It was thick, embossed, the kind used by institutions that didn't need to explain themselves. You will understand soon enough, she said. Then, as if remembering something important, she added, but right now, you should go back inside before they decide your story ends here. Alicia looked at the card but didn't touch it. They? She repeated. The old woman turned slightly toward the dining room, where laughter suddenly rose too loudly, too forced, as if the room itself was pretending everything was normal. Yes, she said quietly. The ones who think they control what kindness is allowed to cost. And then she walked away, disappearing back into the noise of the restaurant before Alicia could ask the only question that suddenly mattered more than anything else. Who exactly had she just helped? And why did it feel like she had already been chosen? Alicia didn't sleep that night. The folded card the old woman had left behind stayed on her small kitchen table like it was watching her. She turned it over once, twice, but never opened it. Something about it felt heavier than paper should feel, like it already carried consequences she hadn't agreed to accept. By morning, her phone buzzed with a single message from the restaurant system. Final shift termination effective immediately. No explanación. No apology. Just clean removal like she had been a misplaced object. She stared at the screen for a long time before setting it down, then looked at her reflection in the dark microwave door. No anger came first, just silence, the kind that happens right before a decision. An hour later, she was standing outside a building she had only ever passed from the bus window. Glass towers, black metal framing, security guards in pressed uniforms who didn't look at people unless they were instructed to. The sign above the entrance read, Marlowe Foods Corporate Headquarters. The restaurant she had worked in wasn't even a standalone place. It was a small branch under something much larger. Something that didn't ask permission to reshape lives. She tightened her jacket, stepped forward, and immediately a guard raised a hand. Employees enter from the back, he said without looking at her. Alicia held up her ID badge. I was told to come here. That wasn't entirely true. But it wasn't entirely false either. The guard scanned her badge, frowned, then motioned for her to wait. Minutes later, a woman in a tailored gray suit appeared at the glass doors. She was young, sharp-eyed, holding a tablet like it was part of her body. Alicia Brooks? She asked. Alicia nodded. The woman didn't smile. You're late. Late for what? Alicia asked. The woman studied her for a second, then turned and walked inside. Training evaluation, she said simply. If you're still interested in keeping a position within the system. I wasn't offered a position, Alicia replied. The woman stopped walking for half a second, then continued. You were observed. That word again. Alicia felt the memory of the old woman's voice tighten somewhere behind her ribs. Observed. The elevator ride was silent. Too smooth, too fast, like the building didn't want people to have time to change their minds. When the doors opened, Alicia stepped into a floor that looked nothing like a restaurant. Everything was glass, steel, and quiet motion. People moving with purpose, not urgency. Screens lined the walls displaying numbers she didn't understand but could feel mattered to someone. The woman led her into a testing room. Rule is simple, she said, placing a tablet on the table. You don't ask for help. You don't explain yourself. You respond to what's in front of you. Alicia looked at the tablet. The first scenario was already loaded. A customer complaint involving refusal of service. Another employee's misconduct report attached. A video file labeled Incident Review. "This isn't serving food," Alicia said quietly. The woman finally looked directly at her. "No," she replied. "It's deciding what kind of people stay inside systems like this." Before Alicia could respond, the screen flickered. A notification popped up across the top of the tablet. Priority alert. Executive family engagement in progress. The woman's expression changed slightly, just enough to be noticed. "Ignore that," she said quickly. But Alicia had already seen the name attached to the alert, partially visible, partially blurred for clearance. And for the first time since she walked into the building, she understood that the folded card wasn't an invitation at all. It was a signal. And somewhere above them, inside a floor she was not yet allowed to enter, someone had already started watching her name appear on a list she was never meant to see. The training room was too quiet in a way that felt intentional, like noise had been designed out of it. Alicia stood in front of the tablet, her reflection faintly visible in the black glass when the screen dimmed between prompts. The woman in the gray suit, her name tag reading Hannah Vale, watched her without blinking, arms crossed, posture perfect in the way only corporate people ever seem to master. "You have 30 seconds, Hannah said. "Decide whether the employee in the report keeps their job or gets flagged for termination review." Alicia didn't respond immediately. Her eyes stayed on the incident file. A junior worker accused of refusing service to an elderly customer during a rush hour. The system was structured, clean, almost too clean. No emotion in the wording, just efficiency dressed as judgment. Alicia's fingers hovered above the screen. "There's no context," she said finally. "There's only behavior," Hannah replied. Alicia exhaled slowly, then tapped the file open. The video loaded. Grainy footage from a restaurant camera, too familiar. A young worker, overwhelmed, pushing back against an elderly woman standing too close to the counter. The angle made everything look harsher than it probably was. Alicia leaned in slightly, noticing details others would miss. The employee's hands shaking, the absence of backup staff, the customer line extending out of frame. "This isn't refusal," Alicia said quietly. Hannah raised an eyebrow. "It's pressure collapse," Alicia continued. "They weren't trained for volume control." A pause. The room didn't react, but something in the air shifted. Hannah stepped closer to the screen. "So you're overriding policy?" Alicia shook her head. "I'm applying reality." She selected a secondary review option buried in the interface, one most candidates didn't notice existed. "Request full shift context log," she said. The system hesitated for half a second before expanding the dataset. Staffing shortages, delayed deliveries, a broken POS system. The picture changed immediately. The employee wasn't careless. They were drowning. Hannah didn't smile, but her eyes sharpened. "Most people don't look past the first frame," she said. Alicia kept her voice steady. "Then most people are making decisions blind." A notification flashed briefly on the side screen. Unscheduled review flagged by executive oversight. It disappeared before fully expanding, but Alicia saw enough to recognize the pattern. Someone higher up had been watching her input in real time. She didn't react, but her hand tightened slightly on the edge of the tablet. "Final decision?" Hannah asked. Alicia tapped. Reassignment plus retraining. Not dismissal. Not punishment. Correction. Hannah studied her for a long moment, then reached forward and locked in the result. "You just made a decision that costs the system time and money," she said. Alicia met her gaze. "I made a decision that keeps it from breaking people." Silence again, but different this time. Not empty. Measured. Hannah closed the tablet and turned slightly toward the glass wall. "You're either going to fail out of this building," she said, "or someone is going to use you." Alicia didn't ask who. She already felt it. As Hannah led her out of the room, Alicia noticed something new pinned to the hallway screen outside. A rotating internal memo titled Executive Family Engagement. Observation phase active. Beneath it, a blurred profile image flickered for half a second. Too fast to fully see, but unmistakably tied to the same system she had been warned to ignore. And for the first time, Alicia understood the bracelet, the card, the silence in the restaurant, and the test in front of her were not separate events. They were connected threads of something already moving toward her, whether she was ready or not. The warning didn't arrive like a message. It arrived like a correction to reality. Alicia felt it first in the atmosphere of the building, not in her phone. The glass corridors of Marlowe Foods' headquarters, which had felt sterile before, now felt observant, like every surface had learned her name. Hannah Vale didn't look at her differently when they walked back from the training floor, but the silence between them had changed, tightened, as if something unseen had started pulling threads in opposite directions. Alicia noticed staff members pausing as she passed, their eyes flicking toward tablets, then away too quickly. Something was being circulated faster than speech. At the far end of the corridor, a wall screen shifted from corporate metrics to an internal bulletin. At first, it looked routine, until Alicia saw her own name embedded in the center of it. Internal review initiated. Misconduct during observation phase. Her steps slowed, but she didn't stop. Hannah finally spoke, low enough that only Alicia could hear. Someone escalated your file. For what? Alicia asked, though she already felt the answer forming in the tightening air. Hannah didn't respond immediately. Instead, she guided her into a side meeting room, closing the door behind them with controlled precision. Inside, a second screen was already on. A video began playing without warning. Alicia froze. It was the restaurant. Her restaurant. The footage showed her standing near the counter, but the angle was wrong, deliberately wrong. It made her look like she was bypassing register protocol, handing food directly to a customer without logging it. The old woman was visible only briefly, blurred at the edges, stripped of context. The caption beneath the video read, "Unauthorized distribution, potential system manipulation." Alicia leaned forward sharply. "That's not what happened." "I know," Hannah said immediately, too quickly, like she had already verified it. But that wasn't what mattered. Another file auto-opened. A written statement from Mr. Calhoun. His tone was polished now, professional, nothing like the man who had thrown soup on the floor. Employee Alicia Brooks demonstrated repeated disregard for operational compliance, emotional interference with customer management, and potential exploitation of vulnerable patrons for personal influence. Alicia stared at the words. The mask was perfect. Not anger policy. Not cruelty procedure. "He's framing kindness as misconduct," she said quietly. Hannah exhaled through her nose. "He's framing you as unstable within a system that values control." The door buzzer outside the room chimed once. A corporate security officer stepped in without knocking. "Alicia Brooks?" he asked, already knowing the answer. "You're being placed under administrative restriction pending executive review. Please surrender your access badge." Alicia didn't move immediately. Her fingers tightened once around the badge clip on her jacket, then slowly unclipped it. As she placed it on the table, she noticed something new on the security officer's tablet, live metadata syncing across departments. Her file wasn't just being reviewed. It was being redistributed. "Who approved this?" Hannah asked sharply. The officer didn't answer directly. Compliance Division flagged inconsistencies during observation protocol. Executive oversight requested immediate containment. The word containment lingered longer than it should have. Alicia finally spoke, her voice steady but lower now. "This isn't about policy." The officer looked at her for the first time. "It never is," he said. When he left, the room didn't feel smaller but heavier. Hannah turned off the screen, but the damage remained, like an imprint on the air. Alicia picked up the printed statement again, scanning it carefully, not for emotion, but for structure. "They didn't just accuse me," she said. "They built a version of me that fits their system." Hannah watched her closely. "That's what internal escalation does." Alicia set the paper down. Outside the glass wall, the corridor screens flickered again, this time showing a new alert. Executive Family Engagement Observation File reassigned. Director Miles oversight active. The name meant nothing to most employees. But Alicia noticed the way Hannah's posture changed the moment she read it. For the first time, Alicia realized this wasn't a misunderstanding that would be corrected with evidence. It was a controlled narrative being built in real time, and she was already inside it. And somewhere beyond the glass, higher in the building she still wasn't allowed to access, someone had just decided her next move would not be a defense, but a collapse. The notice didn't come with shouting or chaos. Came with silence, official, irreversible silence. Alicia stood outside the employee access corridor of Marlowe Foods headquarters, her badge no longer scanning, the red light refusing her existence with every attempt. A security guard avoided her eyes while repeating the same phrase like it had been rehearsed into him. Your access has been suspended pending executive review outcome. Not terminated. Not fired. Suspended, like she was something temporarily erased rather than removed. Behind the glass doors, life continued as if she had never been inside it at all. People in tailored uniforms walked past without slowing, glancing at screens that now displayed her name under a bold label. Compliance risk flag, active investigation. The word risk sat on her identity like a verdict already decided. Hannah Vale stood a few feet away, but she wasn't looking at Alicia. That was worse than confrontation. It meant alignment had already shifted somewhere above them. They pushed it to Director Miles, Hannah said quietly, almost to herself. Alicia finally looked at her. And Hannah hesitated for the first time. And he didn't ask questions. He approved containment. That word again, containment. Not investigation. Not clarification. Containment. Like she was a problem to be sealed before it spread. Alicia felt something cold settle in her chest. Not panic, but recognition. This wasn't confusion anymore. It was architecture. A system building walls around her in real time. So I'm already guilty, she said softly. Hannah didn't answer. That was the answer. The elevator lobby behind them chimed. A group of employees stepped out laughing, then stopped mid-step when they saw her. The laughter didn't resume. It dissolved. One of them quickly looked down at their phone, as if she had become a notification they didn't want associated with them. Alicia stepped back from the glass doors. Not in defeat, in recalibration, because something in her mind had shifted. She was no longer trying to prove innocence. She was trying to understand design. 3 hours earlier, that same hallway had shown her a rotating internal file labeled Executive Family Engagement. Observation phase active. Now she understood it wasn't just observation. It was selection. A memory surfaced sharply. The old woman's bracelet. The insignia. She had seen it before, not as jewelry, but as infrastructure branding on a building lobby display. Marlowe subsidiary ownership mark. Alicia's breath slowed. The clue wasn't decorative. It was connective tissue. She wasn't just a customer, Alicia whispered. Hannah finally met her eyes. Who? Alicia hesitated. The woman from the restaurant. That got Hannah's attention. Immediately. You're saying she's tied to executive family oversight? Alicia didn't answer directly. Instead, she pulled out her phone. The video she had been shown, the manipulated one, was still saved locally before system wipe. She opened it again, not to watch it, but to freeze it at a specific frame. The bracelet. Zoomed. Enhanced. The same insignia. Hannah leaned closer despite herself. That symbol. That's not standard franchise marking. Alicia nodded once. It's ownership-level identification. For the first time, Hannah looked unsettled. Not doubtful, calculating. Before she could speak again, Alicia's phone vibrated violently. A new notification appeared across the lock screen. Formal hearing initiated. Immediate appearance required. Director Miles presiding. Below it, one more line flashed briefly before disappearing into system encryption. Witness statement filed against you. Alicia stared at it for a long moment. Then she locked her phone slowly. They didn't suspend me, she said quietly. They staged me. Hannah didn't respond this time. She only watched as Alicia turned toward the exit doors. Not to leave, but to step forward into something that could no longer be undone. Because whatever was waiting in that hearing room wasn't a chance to defend herself anymore. It was the beginning of a decision already made without her. The hearing room on the top floor of Marlowe Foods headquarters didn't feel like a place for truth. It felt like a place where truth was sorted, filtered, and rewritten until it fit the system's shape. Glass walls surrounded the table, but none of them were transparent in the way Alicia needed them to be. Everything reflected everything else. Executives, screens, legal teams, security feeds. And at the center of it all sat Director Miles, calm in the way people are when they believe the outcome is already owned. Alicia stood alone on the opposite side of the table. No escort. No defense team. Just her. A chair she had not been invited to sit in. And a file labeled with her name thick enough to feel like a physical weight. We're here to resolve allegations of misconduct during observation phase, Miles said, voice smooth, detached. This is not a trial. This is clarification. Alicia looked at the file, then at him. Clarification doesn't start with a conclusion, she said quietly. That made one of the legal advisors shift in their seat. On the screen behind them, the edited restaurant footage appeared again, the same version, polished, structured, persuasive. Alicia stepped forward slightly. Before we talk about that, she said, show the raw feed. A pause. A flicker of hesitation passed through the room. Not from Miles, but from someone behind him. Technician. Alicia noticed it immediately. We don't need raw data, Miles said. We have verified reports. Alicia nodded once. Then verify this properly. She pulled her phone out and placed it on the table. The original file opened, the unedited restaurant footage she had preserved before system access was revoked. The old woman entering, the initial refusal, the shift in behavior from staff when pressure increased. Start at timestamp 1432, Alicia said. No one moved, so she did it herself, projecting it to the room screen through a bypass protocol Hannah had secretly enabled before she was removed from access. Hannah stood at the back of the room now, silent but present, no longer an ally in action, but a witness who had chosen not to disappear. The footage played clean. No edits. No cuts. Just sequence. Alicia pointed once. This is where the narrative breaks, she said. On screen, Mr. Calhoun appeared, clearly visible now, leaning toward the manager after the incident, speaking off camera while the system feed captured his voice sync. The audio enhancement picked it up. Make sure the compliance report doesn't show her intervention. A ripple moved through the room. A legal advisor leaned forward. That's not in the submitted file. Miles didn't react immediately. Audio can be manipulated. Alicia didn't argue. She tapped again. A second layer opened. System logs. Internal timestamps. Access edits. Then check metadata, she said. This wasn't edited externally. It was rewritten internally. The technician behind Miles stiffened. That was the first visible crack. Alicia continued, voice steady but sharper now. Someone with system clearance removed context frames, retagged my actions, and submitted it as misconduct. She looked directly at Miles. Which means this isn't about behavior. It's about protection. Miles finally turned slightly toward the technician. Is that accurate? A long pause. Too long. Then, there were directive-based adjustments requested by operations. Alicia stepped closer to the table. Requested by who? The room didn't answer, so she did. She opened the final file, the ownership registry Hannah had helped her decrypt. The bracelet insignia, the subsidiary mapping, the executive family link. It wasn't speculation anymore. It was architecture. The woman I served wasn't a random customer, Alicia said. She's tied to executive ownership oversight. That sentence changed the air. Not because it was emotional, but because it was structural. Miles leaned back slightly, studying her for the first time like she was no longer just a case file. You're saying she influenced this? Alicia shook her head. I'm saying she observed it. The room went quiet in a different way now. Not procedural. Personal. Then the doors at the back of the hearing room opened. No announcement. No warning. The old woman entered. No longer fragile. No longer anonymous. The entire executive panel shifted instinctively. Even Miles stood. Alicia didn't move. The woman walked forward slowly and placed a small sealed document on the table. "You all built your conclusions without context," she said calmly. Then she looked at Alicia. She didn't. A long silence followed. Then Miles opened the seal. Inside, full system audit authorization, executive override clearance, and confirmation of identity. The words CEO Family Oversight Authority were impossible to misinterpret. The false report on the screen behind them automatically flagged red. Unauthorized modification detected. For the first time, Mr. Calhoun, standing now at the side door, summoned too late, spoke. "This is being taken out of proportion." But his voice faltered as the audit log expanded across every screen in the room, line by line, showing his edits, his requests, his narrative construction. Alicia didn't smile. She didn't react. She simply watched as the structure around her stopped pretending it had ever been neutral. And in that moment, the truth didn't feel like victory. It felt like something irreversible finally being seen in the exact place it had been buried. The room didn't erupt. It didn't need to. The silence that followed the audit expansion was heavier than any shouting could have been. Screens across the executive hearing chamber continued to display line after line of system overrides, timestamps, clearance levels, redacted authorizations now forcibly unsealed. Mr. Calhoun stood near the side door like a man realizing the floor beneath him had stopped belonging to him. The old woman remained still at the table's center, her hands resting calmly over the sealed document she had placed down earlier, as if she had already lived through this moment before anyone else had imagined it. Alicia stood a few steps away from her, not moving, not because she was frozen, but because for the first time, no one in the room had the authority to interrupt her presence. Director Miles broke first. "This level of unauthorized narrative alteration," he began, but stopped when the audit feed highlighted his own approval stamp buried within procedural shortcuts. Not direct corruption, not obvious abuse, but permission given without scrutiny. That was enough to make the system turn on itself. Hannah Vale, still at the back wall, finally stepped forward. Not to defend Alicia, not to attack anyone, just to confirm what the data had already proven. "She flagged inconsistencies on day one," Hannah said quietly, "and she was dismissed as unstable for it." That sentence landed differently than the rest, because it wasn't accusation, it was record. Mr. Calhoun tried to speak again, but this time his voice cracked under the weight of visibility. "I was protecting operational efficiency." "You were protecting convenience," Alicia said, her voice steady but no longer soft. She turned slightly toward him. "And you built a system that called cruelty efficiency." The old woman finally looked at Alicia directly, not as a test, not as an observer, as someone finishing an evaluation that had started long before the restaurant ever existed in Alicia's memory. "You didn't break under pressure," she said quietly. "That's why you were chosen." Alicia didn't respond immediately. The word chosen should have felt like reward. Instead, it felt like responsibility being transferred in real time. The room waited not for punishment now but for structure. Miles exhaled once, then made the only decision left that didn't collapse the institution entirely. "Mr. Calhoun," he said, voice stripped of neutrality, "you are terminated from all operational control pending formal investigation and legal action." Security moved immediately. No struggle. No resistance left to offer. The system had already decided before the bodies followed. Another executive tried to speak about miscommunication, but the audit log expanded again, revealing layers of ignored reports, erased complaints, and flagged warnings that had never reached human review. The narrative didn't just fail, it unraveled. When it was over, the room felt emptied of illusion rather than people. The old woman stood first. She walked toward Alicia and placed something small into her hand. The same folded card from before, only now it was opened. Inside was not an invitation, but a designation. Foundation Oversight Access, Community Ethics Division. "This system doesn't correct itself," she said. "It needs people who refuse to look away." Alicia looked down at the card, then back at her. "And what if I don't want power?" The woman studied her for a moment, then answered softly. Then use it to make sure no one else is punished for choosing kindness. There was no applause.
No celebration.
Just the quiet reorganization of consequence. Mr. Calhoun was escorted out without spectacle, but his silence carried further than his authority ever had. Others in the room who had approved edits, ignored flags, or remained neutral were assigned reviews that could not be avoided or delegated. Responsibility finally had direction. As the room slowly emptied, Alicia returned to the glass corridor outside. The same corridor where she had once walked as a terminated employee now reflected her differently, not as someone removed, but as someone positioned. On the wall screen, the restaurant footage briefly appeared again, looping the moment she had first stepped forward with a tray in her hands. But now the image carried a different weight. Not humiliation, not risk, a decision. Alicia watched it for a long moment, then reached into her pocket and pulled out the apron she had kept without knowing why. It was folded neatly, still faintly marked with the stain from the spilled soup that had started everything. She didn't put it on. She just held it. And for the first time, it wasn't a symbol of where she had been. It was a reminder of what had to change next.